This episode is brought to you by HASA. Pool Pros. Are you using the new HASA Pro Rewards app? Earn points on HASA to render purchases, redeem them for gift cards and product rewards. Download the free HASA Pro Rewards app today and get rewarded. By the Bottom Feeder. With their new cartridge filter assembly, now you can vacuum dirt in a pool down to 10 microns. Don't just vacuum the pool, finish it.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about some common mistakes you can make out there. And you may have made some of these already, and you may make some of these in the future. And I think just hearing about it will hopefully prevent you from making one or more of these mistakes. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. From me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. So I'm probably guilty of all of these mistakes at one time or another. And it's part of business, part of life. I mean, nobody's perfect. Some mistakes are kind of bonehead. Other mistakes are, yes, you can make that mistake and really not, understand why someone would make that mistake, or you can't understand why someone could make that mistake. And the other ones are like head scratchers again. So I'll start with one that I've made before, and one that's actually very dangerous when it comes to the liability aspect of pool service. And that is leaving the fill line or the water line or the garden hose or something filling the pool on and not turning it off. Now, the #1 rule out there, it's a really hard one to live by, because when you get to a pool that's low on water, your first instinct is to turn on the fill line and add some water to the pool, because you know that it could damage the equipment and it could make the pool hard to maintain. You may already have algae forming in the pool. It may look really bad on the surface because nothing is circulating. So your first thought is, well, I'll turn on the fill line and add some water, so at least while I'm here, the pool will fill up and it won't look as bad. But that's a big mistake, because a lot of times the majority of the liability calls come in because of leaving the water on. This is a big thing in the industry. So rule #1 is you should never fill the pool up for the customer. And it's really hard to do. The situation where it's already sucking air and causing some problems with the equipment, you could turn the pool off and then text the customer letting them know that you turned the pool off and it's going to be off for a few hours. Usually with an automatic timer, you can just turn it off and it'll come back on the next day. If you have an automated system, you can put it in timeout mode, and that way it's off for 3 hours at least, until the customer gets the chance to fill up that pool. I think that's the wisest thing to do, and it's hard to do, definitely. It's much easier to turn on the fill line for 15 or 20 minutes and then to do the other things I mentioned. But you open yourself up for liability by filling the pool up. If we have employees fill the pool up, it opens you up for liability, so you don't want to do that. There was one case in particular where one of the group members had messaged me saying that the plumbers had the water off to the house because they had disconnected the water heater, and his employee saw that the pool was low, so he tried to turn the fill line on, realized that the water was off to the house, and so he went to the main. This is a really a go-getter type employee, it sounds like. So he went to the main line and saw that the water was off, so he turned the water back onto the house, and he filled the pool up. But of course, since the water heater was disconnected, and that's why the water was off to the house, you can understand the liability and the problems that caused. So that's like an extreme don't fill the pool up scenario. But in reality, if you fill the pool up and forget, now there's a pool guide trick where you put your truck keys on the fill line, and that way you won't drive away without your keys. But I've done this before. I've used this trick, but I've had to go to my truck to get something. So I'll take my keys off of there, unlock my truck, and forget to put them back on the fill line. So that could happen as well. There's really no fail-safe, bulletproof way to do this. The best thing is to make it a policy that the customer needs to fill the pool. Now, what happens if you're taking care of an empty home, like a realtor has you taking care of a house that's empty? In that case, I would get the Pool Century fill line that connects to a garden hose and put it there. But if the house is occupied by a tenant or the homeowner, definitely they're the ones that should fill the pool and not you. It's just a huge liability. You can flood the house, you can flood the neighbor's house, you can cause structural damage. Many things can happen with the water running and the pool overflowing, and the water's got to go somewhere. So keep that in mind as far as liability. The next thing that you may run into is doing a repair that's over your head. Now, this may not be something that happens right away when you're doing the repair, or you've done repairs before and you've done this repair, but there may be situations, and I'll give you an example from another group member, and he was fairly new at doing repairs, and he said he was going to bid this customer, and he was going to replace the filter and the pump at the same time. And it sounds pretty simple and easy. You could do the filter and the pump. It might even be better to replumb everything, but there was a lot of things he ran into that he wasn't familiar with. There was some plumbing issues he ran into, and he did make some cuts first before remembering where everything was going. And if you don't look at the pool pad and memorize everything, and you're new at this, that could be a problem. And it was a problem for him. He couldn't quite remember everything he was doing, and then he couldn't get something to fit properly. So that's definitely a situation where you're doing something that you're not quite familiar with, and you can get over your head doing that. And it's one of those things where, yes, you know how to install things, but sometimes some installation paths are different, and sometimes it's more difficult. I have this one pool that I remember where the builder had put the equipment up against the house in such a manner that if you wanted to change out the motor, if the motor were to die, you'd have to actually cut the pumps off of the plumbing and replumb everything because there was no unions, and he put the motor right up against the house. So you're running into situations like this where something simple like just changing the motor becomes an ordeal. So just be aware that if you do bid for repairs, always you want to go there and see what exactly you're going to be doing. Sometimes we get a little bit, prideful or arrogant, and we think we can handle everything. I also had a situation where I was replacing a pump, and they had the plumbing going directly over the pump basket. It was like a mess install, and for me to replumb this and do all this, I had to actually call in a friend that does plumbing for a living, and he actually went there and redid it. Another instance was a gas line, that there was a gas leak somewhere, and discovered that it was underground. And so, at that point, it's out of my territory. And then I called in an actual plumber that does gas lines, and he replaced the gas line at a certain point. So there are certain things that you'll run into that it's not in your field. It changes over to the plumber's field or the electrician's field, and you have to know when that is. In some cases, you may not know until you start doing it and realize, man, this pump's not getting the full 240 volts here. There's something wrong with the electrical, and then you have to call an electrician in at that point. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. Something else you may end up doing one of these days is leaving the pool on when you should have turned it off. And this has happened to me. I was doing a filter cleaning, and then I had to go do something. I don't know what it was exactly. So I had to go somewhere and come back and finish it. But I forgot to turn the timer off. And, at some point the timer came back on and all the water was coming out of the filter. Well, the reason I knew this was when I got back to the house, I saw water coming down the driveway, and immediately I knew exactly where that water was coming from. And so I ran back there and I realized, yes, I should have, if I left for an hour to do something. I should have turned the power off to the pump because, the water was coming out everywhere. So that was a messy situation. It was not pleasant. And it's one of those things where it's more than an oops, It's one of those things where you should have remembered to turn the water off at that point and you didn't. Other times where you've left the pool running 24 hours a day when, you put it in service mode and you forget to put it back into auto mode and the pump is running and the customer calls you 4 days later saying, hey, I think the pump is running like 24 hours a day. That's happened as well. Not quite as devastating as flooding the backyard by not turning off the pump, but just as irritating to the customer that, you've had the pool on for 4 or 5 days. I've even gotten back to an account before where I left it in service mode and it's still in service mode when I get back there. And I've confused myself. I'm like, why is this pool in service mode? And then I have to think back and, as you're getting older, it's harder to think that far back. A week ago, I'm like, oh yeah, I was doing the filter clean and I left it in service mode. And actually no one never noticed that this pool was running 24/7 for the whole week. But I've done that myself. So another thing is that just be aware of when you should turn the pool off, doing repairs, filter cleaning, and when you should turn the service mode off on an automated system. And this is something that you're going to run into. The automated systems all have the timeout, service, and auto mode. And I rarely use service mode for that reason unless I'm planning to leave the pool on for 24 hours, 24/7 or off for 24/7, then I'll use service mode. But you can make that mistake of forgetting to put it back in auto or timeout mode. So just be aware of that service mode button and the fact that the pump is going to run 24/7 in that mode. Something else that I've made this mistake, and this is one that I really advise you not to make. Actually, it's a twofold mistake that you can make. The first one is that there's algae in the pool and you treat it very lightly, like it's not a big deal. And I've done this before, like there's a little bit of algae on the step, maybe a streak in the deep end, and I have to go back to my truck for an algicide or something, or for a gallon of liquid chlorine, and I'm a little lazy at that moment, so I'll just brush it and I'll just put, one extra tablet in the floater and just call it a day at that point. But when you go back there the next week, one thing you didn't realize is that there was a bunch of microalgae forming in that pool. The algae you saw was like the tip of the iceberg. And if you go back there the following week, you'll find that the whole pool is streaked in yellow. It looks like you haven't been there in a month. And that's because you didn't treat the algae aggressively. So I learned that lesson the hard way. So whenever I see algae somewhere, I always assume that this is just the tip of the iceberg and there's a lot of other microalgae that's under the surface that I can't visibly see. So I'll treat this pool. I'll throw in 2 gallons of liquid chlorine. In the old days, I used to put in a cap full of sodium bromide. You don't have that luxury. So you can use Polyquat 60. You can use, a copper algicide. You can use whatever you want. You can add phosphorus remover, different things that you can do in your pool route, whatever your regimen is. The point is that whatever algicide you use or however much chlorine you're going to use, you definitely want to utilize that and not treat it lightly like, okay, it's not a big deal, or you're just too lazy to go back to your truck, which I'm guilty of. It's hot, it's getting near the end of the day and I don't want to mess with it. I'll just brush it and not worry about it. The other aspect of that is if you get to an account and the filter is dirty, maybe they had a pool party that week and the PSI is really high, and for a fact that backwashing it is not going to do much because you've done that before. Or if it's a cartridge filter and you know that the pool doesn't look that great, you have to clean the filter. It's really easy just to kind of put a Band-Aid on it, like throw extra chlorine in, let it run longer. But the real issue is the filter and the flow of the pool. You can tell that it's not flowing well. And it's truly a big hassle to take a filter apart in the middle of your pool route when you weren't planning on doing that. But I would really advise you to do that. I've had a D filter that I knew I had to clean. It was at 30 PSI, so I did a quick backwash, and the pool looked pretty terrible. It was cloudy. And I knew that the filter had to be cleaned for this to be turned around, but I was lazy. I wasn't, I was tired, and so I just backwashed it for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, put a little D in and called it a day. Went back the next week, the pool looked like a disaster. And I knew it wouldn't look that great because the filter actually needed to be cleaned on that spot. So there are instances where the cartridge filter and D filter need to be cleaned on the spot, and it's really painful to spend the time doing that. but believe me, it's better than the alternative, which is not cleaning it or just giving it a quick backwash when you know that's not going to be effective, and then getting back there the next week and dealing with a pretty much disaster at that point. Pool cloudy with algae, zeroed out with chlorine, because you should have been more proactive in cleaning the filter. So these are hard things out there. Honestly, a lot of these are things that, that are just human nature. You just don't want to do it because you're tired and it's hot. But I've learned that being lazy out there does cost you later, especially a week later or even midweek when the customer calls you. But again, these are all common things that just happen out there, and a lot of these can be avoided. And of course, always think liability. Always think, is the customer going to be happy with the pool if I don't do this week or this moment? And kind of look ahead, because as you know, and if you're doing pool service for a long time, between 1 week and another is quite a long time, and a lot of bad things can happen within that week. So just be aware of that and be very proactive out there on your pool route. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon. There'll be a drop-down menu with over 2,000 podcasts there. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.